You're thinking about using AI to do simulations of people?
If it can roleplay as one character, why not multiple? You can have it be a whole focus group for you.
So basically you typed in a prompt and then it spun up an audience and then it asked the audience that question. So like, which of these three would you click on? So that's cool. But also in the sidebar, you can see like each individual like simulated person, like what they said.
You can test things and kind of look at the assumptions that you're making before you actually put it out there in the world.
I think people may not like even really understand the full weight of what you're saying. My workflow now is, when we do an announcement or like I'm writing a post or whatever, I will figure out like what I want to tweet or what the headline should be or whatever. And you have a little MVP that I've been using and I can just like put it in there and get some wisdom of the crowds. And I love it. This is so valuable. Before you'd had to like throw it out into the world and that costs time and money. And if you don't have an audience, like it's really hard, or if you don't know the people it's going to be going to. So yeah, I love this thing. Where people's heads might be going is like, okay, cool. You can just like automate everything. You'll always have the right answer to every question and you're going to make amazing content like every single time or whatever. I think what's interesting about this is there's so many different variables to it. I think it's not going to do the thing that people think where it's like, oh, we're just going to turn into like zombies and everyone's marketing messages are going to be the same, because the space of possibilities is really big. Michael, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here, Dan.
Good to have you. So for people who don't know, you describe yourself as a recovering agency owner. So you had a marketing agency that you grew to 50 people, and then you sold it in 2020, and then you just dove into AI stuff. You wrote the prompt engineering book for O'Reilly, and you are also a regular columnist on Every. You have an amazing column called Also True for Humans. I'm psyched to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And I've been watching a bunch of these episodes and just kind of thinking about how other people use AI. So it'd be interesting to see like how I differ.
Amazing. So I'm excited to have you. I think like one of the reasons I really love your work is you have a little bit of you have a tinkerer's mindset, and you're just always like playing with new things and getting psyched about them and like exploring the limits of what the current technology can do. I think that's why you're a really good prompt engineer and why you think about it so much. I think you're really good at like building little workflows to yourself to automate things. And I'm always into or interested in what people like you are currently like playing around with, because I think like what you're into right now, other people are going to be into in like 6 months or a year or something like that. And the thing that you're working on that I'm most excited about is you're thinking about using AI to do simulations of people. And I wonder if let's start there. Lay the groundwork for me, explain what that is and why you think that's interesting. And then let's talk about what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so I studied economics and, then went into a career in marketing, but always was interested in this idea of like being able to predict behavior. I think that's what got me into economics, because with microeconomics, you could, somewhat predict behavior, and then get into growth marketing that way because you could run A/B tests and you could see how to predict behavior. Would they click on this ad or that ad? And I guess this is kind of natural that when I got into AI, I would start messing around with that stuff too. And I use role play a lot, right? Like, and that's pretty obvious. Like that's the number one prompt engineering tactic that everyone tries first is like, as a researcher in this field, like give me an answer, right? And it actually really does change the answer. And because the training data is so wide, it can kind of role play as almost any character, right? And the logical leap there is, well, if it can role play as one character, why not multiple? And you can have it, be a whole focus group for you. You can have it be an entire audience. And then you can test things and kind of look at the assumptions that you're making and see, in a risk-free environment, whether your idea would work or not before you actually put it out there in the world.
Right. I want to stop there because I think people may not like even really understand the full weight of what you're saying. Like, there are a lot of studies that show if you tell a AI to like adopt a certain personality, it will like make a lot of the same decisions, very high overlap as like a real person who has that personality. So one thing that I did early on, this is maybe like a year ago ish. It was like when GPT-4 was still good, which should tell you like that feels like forever ago.
Yeah, it's like 100 years ago now.
Yeah. But one thing that I did was because I sort of knew about this research too, and I was like kind of into it, and I got GPT-4 to look at my tweets, and then based on my tweets, write a personality profile for me. And then I gave that personality profile to another GPT-4, and I was like, be this person and adopt this personality. And then I had it take a personality test as me. So I took the personality test, then it took the personality test to see like what the overlap in the scores were. And the overlap was extremely high. And then I was like, I wonder if like someone who knows me really well in my life would be able to do what GPT-4 just did, just based on knowing me. And so I had my girlfriend at the time and my mom pretend to be me and take a personality test and try to think about what I would pick. And GPT-4 is better than both of them just from my Twitter account, it's crazy. It's really wild.
Yeah. Maybe they don't read enough of your tweets, I guess. So.
It's really not that GPT-4 is good. It's just an indictment of my ex-girlfriend.
No, I mean, yeah, it's I've done the same thing. Like very early on, I was doing a lot of writing, and I was like, why don't I just automate my entire job? And then actually I did do it, and people couldn't tell. And people would ask me like, hey, Mike, I really like that thing you posted on LinkedIn. And I was like, you're gonna have to remind me what it was.
I'm too busy and important and popular now to even know what I tweeted or what I put on LinkedIn. So.
Exactly. Must be how like famous people feel, when they have someone managing their account. But yeah, like I always thought like, oh, there's actually surprisingly good at this. And then I saw, like you said, I saw a bunch of these studies. There was one that jumped out at me. I'll have to find the link, but they basically said that if you do a 2-hour interview with someone and you take the transcript and then create a personality profile, you get 80% accuracy in big 5 personality traits, like personality tests, how they, with the decisions they make in economic games, how they vote as well. And the crazy thing is that like 80% is already pretty amazing, but it's actually as accurate as if you interview the same person again a second time. So there's always drift. Like when you interview, like if I interview you today and then I interview you next month, Dan is only going to agree with 80% of what Dan said today. So virtual Dan is like as good as that.
I contain multitudes, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and where you're going with that is like, if you're a founder and you want to like interview your customers or know what your customers want, and it's, it's in an industry that you're not as familiar with, like a good place to start is just like talking to ChatGPT or talking to Claude, which I've done. It really works. It's like, it's crazy how well it works just from like basic prompting. If you want to like you're thinking about, I want to build a product in X industry, like let me go figure out what that kind of person, how that kind of person would think and what their day is like and all that kind of stuff. It's like really, really good, but you're taking it a step further. Tell us about what you've been building behind the scenes.
Yeah. So this all kind of stemmed from a post I did for you guys, actually, Personas of Thought, my last one in the column, where I had like a prompt I was using, or I said, okay, let's generate a bunch of people who are relevant personas who could answer this question first, and then query, and then like kind of fill in the blanks of like what that person would say in answer to the question. So I was doing that all in one prompt, but then I wanted to automate it, so I wrote a script. And then I think we were talking. You were like, "Help me solve a debate." I think you liked the. You were trying to describe.
How should we describe every a meta media company or a multimodal media company? Was the question, and Kate, our editor in chief, was like, "I don't like meta," and I was like, but I like it. And so we were like, well, let's test like the wisdom of the crowds. Like, let's see what would happen. And then you built the script, you put it into the script.
Yeah, I ran the script, and then the thing that kind of convinced me to get working on this a bit more was that you changed your mind. I don't know if that's like it's like very rare that I see a CEO change their mind about anything. So I was like, okay, there might be something here, And then I was using it for everything. I was like, oh, I'm actually changing my mind too, and it was an unexpected result. Like I didn't expect. I thought people would be really skeptical of the AI responses. But I think because each AI is like answering itself, it gives the reasons. And then when you summarize those reasons, then you can kind of look at them and go, oh, I agree with those reasons. And therefore I can change my mind without being,
Totally.
too stuck in my ways. I don't know, like how is that like, is that kind of a similar thought you had at the time? Or
Basically, I mean, like, I think, my basic way of being as a CEO or writer or whatever is like, as I talk, I'm like paying attention to how people respond. And I'll like get a sense for like, ooh, this little thing I just tried like worked really well, And then that's how I write headlines, or that's how I figure out ideas and all that kind of stuff, is I'm just like constantly trying stuff. And so that feedback loop is very important to me. And that's why I love, using X or whatever, is because like I can just like put something out and like lots of people will interact with it or not, or like doing sales meetings, the same thing, all that kind of stuff. And so this feels like an extension of that, where I can take way more risks, and I can also like, it's a little more quantitative. It's a little bit more like I can pit one thing versus another. Whereas in real life, like people remember what you just said. So like, you can't just wind back the clock and be like, what if I said it another way? How would you respond? It's like hard to do like a really like a fair test, and so I was immediately like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And also like, I do think like having the thoughts of the model is like really helpful, because they were like, I think they were like, Meta just sounds like Facebook to me or whatever. And that's what Kate was saying. And I was like, I don't know, Kate, like I'm the CEO. Like, I don't think of Meta when I think of it or whatever. But other people were thinking, and I was like, okay, well that makes a lot of sense. And then I changed my mind. And yeah, like it is, I will do anything to get this to be part of our bundle, because I love this product. I think it's so cool. Like my workflow now is, when we do an announcement or like I'm writing a post or whatever, like I will, use Spiral, which is our content repurposing platform, to figure out like what I want to tweet or what the headline should be or whatever. And then I'm just like pinging you, or you have a little demo or little MVP that I've been using, and I can just like put it in there and get some wisdom of the crowds. And I love it. And what's interesting to me too is, I think where people are going, like where people's heads might be going, is like, okay, cool, you can just like automate everything, and like, you'll always have the right answer to every question, and you're going to make like super, super like crazy, amazing content like every single time or whatever. And I think what's interesting about this is there's so many different variables to it. So like, for example, one variable is, what is the audience? And you can spin up different audiences with different like demographics and different viewpoints and personalities or whatever. So we have an every audience, and then we have like a hacker news audience that we can test and all that kind of stuff. And then also the results that you get are extremely dependent on the question that you ask. And so like, if I'm pitting one thing versus another, it's not like going and finding like, what is the best possible way to phrase this? It's just like pitting one thing versus another. And like, maybe there would be a way to like automatically like try tens of thousands of messages or whatever. But even then, like, you start to realize that the kind of like space of possibilities is so huge. It's so huge that, anything, like, you can only ever test a small portion of it, and different people are going to start in different places in the landscape. And so, yes, these tools are like super powerful, and like it makes my process way more efficient to like have it available. But I think it's not going to do the thing that people think, where it's like, oh, we're just going to turn into like zombies, and like, and everyone's marketing messages are going to be the same, because the space of possibilities is really big.
Yeah, exactly. Like those two things combined, right? Like the space that you're testing it in, and like the personas you're using, and then like, because like a hacker news audience is going to be very different from your Twitter audience or whatever. But yeah, like that was like something that we did a lot of in the agency. Like we were testing tons of creative ideas with Facebook ads, and you could just never have like enough budget. Even the biggest brands like don't have enough budget to test everything, right? So yeah, like this kind of expands the space in which you can play in, but it's still your duty to play. Like you still have to come up with good ideas, and AI can help you come up with good ideas too. Like I tend to use it in the brainstorming phase, and then I use it in the testing phase, but I'm in the middle. I see quite often it's better at judging than it is at like finalizing the copy. And this is something I saw a lot of, like as a prompt engineer, like working over the past 2 years, is just that like LLMs are actually pretty good at judging the results of tasks, even if they can't do the task very well themselves, which kind of led me down this path in some respects as well.
That's really interesting. Um, I want to push you there because I've had experiences with like Claude, for example, where I'm like putting in like a essay or whatever, and I'm like grade this essay, and it just like always gives you a B plus the first time or an A minus the first time, and then like if you make some revisions, it always moves up to an A or whatever. So like, where are the tasks where it is good at judging, and where are the tasks where it's kind of going to give you like that kind of bull, like, oh, it's an A minus or whatever, and here's, and the next turn it's an A.
Yeah, it's really bad at grading. So you can't grade things on a Likert scale very easily. Like you can't give it like stars out of 5. It tends to always overestimate the middle. So it's almost like being too nice to you. Everything's like a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm like mean.
I know, yeah. And there are tricks for getting it to be more mean, but actually, what I use it for a lot in terms of grading is I'll have like something that is a 1 or a 0. So I'll have some criteria of like, for me, a good article is one that is like as concise as possible. So I'll have like a 1 and 0 on the concise scale. Is this concise, right? I'll have another one, which is like, does this have a compelling hook? And I'll kind of build up maybe like 20 of these for any task that I'm automating. And then I'll run my testing suite, and each one is like an LLM judge that just checks that 0 1. And when I combine that score together, it just kind of gives me an aggregate score that is much more reliable. When you run it again, it's not as it's not changing as much.
That's interesting. So what about like, so first of all, I like the idea of breaking it up into subtasks, but then like within a specific subtask, like the hook, is it still only going to be able to do like 0 or 1, like good hook or bad hook? Or could you do like 0 to 5 and would it be able to do that?
Yeah, it's not as good when you go 0 to 5. So what I would try and do is break that up into break that classification down into subclassifications, right? So like I would think about, okay, what is a good hook? A good hook is like, grabs your attention, and a good hook maybe name drops or references something famous or credible. A good hook does this. And the way I get these, by the way, is I use an LLM judge for this too. I think the other thing it's really good at is comparison. So you can give it 2 different articles that you've written, and you say, what is different between these 2 articles? And then you look at the differences, and then some of those will then become judge criteria.
That's a whole other tool that would be super useful, is like just recursively make it like recursively creating a template classifier thing that like takes a bunch of examples of good and bad and then uses that to create like the most detailed possible rubric for another LLM to use, Yeah,
I did think about doing that. I worried it was like way too far down the rabbit hole. I don't know.
It might be
how much. Don't know how much people actually care about the quality of their writing for most places.
Yeah, maybe not for writing, but like in general, I think like I feel like there's got to be use cases for that, but it may not be like a today thing. Like it might be like in a year, people will be more sensitive to it kind of thing,
Yeah, I was doing it a lot for prompt engineering, like with my clients. And then once you have like a list of these criteria, then you can build a metric, and then you can use like a prompt optimization library, and that goes pretty deep into the weeds, like DSPY or something like that, because then you can improve the accuracy of the classifier. And then once the classifier is much better, then you can improve the accuracy of the generation task as well. So it depends on how deep you want to go on this, but this is like something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
I want to go deep. I mean, the thing I'm thinking about, like we're talking about making evals basically. And I'm just thinking about Quora, our email tool, and like trying to improve those summaries, and then trying to figure out like what is a good summary, and we're basically doing this where like every week I like go in and look at the summaries that Quora generates for me with Kieran, who's the GM of Quora, and I like literally like rewrite my inbox for him. Personally.
That's good. That's usually what I try to get the clients to do.
Yeah, and just sort of hope that over time, like we'll have enough examples and enough rewrites and enough pulling out all those principles that it starts to work. And it's really fun. It's really interesting, and it's also really hard. And I love all of the like mapping all the little things that I know that are not explicit that I just sort of know, because I'm like, this summary is wrong, or like, here's how I would summarize this, but like, and I can do it, but I can't explain it until I look at it. And then I'm like, well, this is the rule I'm following, and it's really fun.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know the rules you're following as well.
You mostly don't know the rules you're following. That's part of the fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you see it, then you're like, oh, I get it. So I was trying to make like a Tinder-like interface when I'm doing this, where I'm like 1 or 0, 1 or 0.
Yeah,
thumbs up,
it's like
thumbs
the
down.
eye doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Better or worse,
Yeah. But so I'll walk you through how to make quick evals for this, right? So if you take that big list of all the emails where you have the one that it generated and then the one that you rewrote, then what you want to do is run a big analysis. You can do this in a Jupyter notebook or get the engineers to do it, or do it manually. It takes a long time. But you just you compare. Just ask, say, Claude or GPT-4, what is the difference between the rewritten and the original? And then you take all of those differences and then summarize and say, what are the main differences between a good email and a bad email? And you ask it for bullet points, and then you have each bullet point then becomes your evaluation criteria. Yeah, and then
that's really interesting.
And then you can look at the accuracy of the evaluation criteria, because you have now you have, like, for every one of your rewritten emails, you have whether it scored 1 or 0 on that evaluation criteria, whether it was present or not. So then you can do like look at the false positives, false negatives. Like this example, I said was it didn't have a good hook, but like my LLM judge said it had a good hook, so it was wrong. Right, so that's like a false positive. So that would mark the score of the classifier down. That's what you do.
And you would do this in a Jupyter notebook, or like, what's the format that you keep all the emails and examples in?
Yeah, I would love to use a tool to do this, and I have tried a lot of them. And I find the abstractions change so often with AI that I keep going back to just, no framework, no tool, just a Jupyter notebook. And then I'm doing it in Cursor, and I'm just letting Claude like YOLO create the create the interface, create the create save everything locally in CSVs and stuff. And it's probably not the best way to do it, but I'm like I'm like the sort of guy that just doesn't really care that much about the elegance of my code, and just want to kind of get the job done.
I've always been like that, and now like everyone is catching up to us, because like now everyone's just like, well, I let the LLM do it, and I press accept all, and I've always basically like YOLO'd all my code. Just I used to have to handwrite it, and now I don't.
Yeah, yeah, I was YOLOing code back when it was Stack Overflow, Yeah. Just copy someone else's code in there and just see if it runs.
You know what this also reminds me of is like I frequently, all the time, like we run a media company, so like all the time I'm giving feedback to different people that's like the same on their writing or like the videos they make or the tweets or whatever. And like I just want someone to like make a rule thing and then like make a bot that just like grades this stuff and gives all that feedback, because it's like so repetitive. And what's been really interesting is we have this writer, Alex, who started writing with us over the last month or two, and he writes Context Window, which is our Sunday email, and it like he writes all of the like, here's what happened in AI, here's all the new releases, here's some analysis or whatever, and then also sometimes like when new models come out, like I always write a big piece. So like OpenAI launched deep research this week, and so like I wrote that, and we collaborated on that. And the first time we collaborated, he's a junior writer, right? And so he's got a ton of great ideas, but like the first draft he did of that, like of the first piece we did together, which was it was some other new model release, I can't remember, but it was the first draft he did. Like I was like, oh, this is not good. Like no shade to Alex, but like
it doesn't feel like you, right?
Yeah, and not just not like me, like, because his bylines on it and stuff, but it had a lot of the information that was supposed to be in there, but it was also like it had a lot of information that shouldn't be in there, and then like the actual sentences themselves, like, just weren't that good. And there's a lot of reasons and a lot of mistakes and a lot of whatever. And so what I did was, like, after he gave me the draft, like, we didn't have a lot of time, so I just like rewrote it. And like, honestly, like that kind of thing where it's like a new product release, like it doesn't take me that long to write. Like, it took me like 45 minutes to write the whole thing once all the information is there. And then what I had him do is take his draft and then take my draft and throw it into O1 Pro and like be like, what's the difference? And like, the next time, like when we wrote this deep research piece, I had him write the first draft, and it was like 1,000 times better the first time. And I was like, what the because like before all of these tools, to get from where he was to what I saw him deliver would have taken like 1,000 articles. He would have to write 1,000 articles, or like a year or two of like really grinding. And it was just like the next time it was great. And I was just like, this is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And it's because like he's sort of, every time I edit him, he like throws in the difference and then like makes a little rule book, and like is constantly, as he's writing, going back with the O1 or you know, any of these models and having it remind him of some of these things, and write little portions that he struggles with and all that kind of stuff. And it's so much better. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people are missing, is that yes, AI is like a threat to people's jobs, and you know, nobody really knows what's going to happen as we get like, you know, PhD level AIs doing everything. But then at the same time, they're also helping us learn a lot faster. So if you're actually using these tools and you have you kind of these, like, you're keeping rule books, right, of what is a good article, like according to the every style guide, right? Then you have that opinion, that strong opinion based on, you know, kind of the collective wisdom of the publication, right? And then that is a prompt, right? Like, it's not. I feel like prompts are kind of converging, where you'll be using the same prompt for people and for AI, but yeah, it is essentially like what I did at the agency as well. Like, we would write these SOPs, we called them, like standard operating procedures, and we had like a Google Drive full of hundreds of them, and it was like, here's how I do this, here's how I do that. Yeah,
that's the thing that, like, you know, I don't know, a year ago, like the really popular thing to say was like, oh, like prompt engineering is going to be dead or whatever. And it's like, and that the opposite has turned out to be the case. Like, it has become more and more important. And I think the mistake that people made when they said that is, what they were saying is the gap between what you intend and what the model does is going to get smaller and smaller. Like, so the gap between your objective and what it does is smaller and smaller. But like, the thing that people miss is that everybody has different objectives. Like, objectives are these big, high dimensional things that are really hard to express. And people who are better at detailing that their particular objective are prompting, and that's like what it is, you know? And so like, detailed prompts are not going away because people have very detailed like things they need to get out to tell the model what to do. And I just think that's like a really interesting. I love the ways that we tend to misjudge new technologies, and this is, I think, a really great example.
Yeah, I think it stems from the fact that a lot of the people who are early in AI come from machine learning or engineering backgrounds or data science, and while obviously that's a huge benefit, and you know, they did really well even very early on in AI to like get some of these systems working. They only really worked on things that were well specified. Yeah. Being engineers, like the tool is already briefed, right? Like the product manager took the messy world outside and like crammed it into a PRD for you, right? So like you don't realize how messy the world is, I think, when you're an engineer. And I say that as someone who, you know, was a business person and now is a full-time engineer. And I can see both sides of it. But and so they are completely right that like for well-specified tasks, you don't need to do prompt engineering anymore. You can use DSPY, but like so much of the world is completely unspecified, and like people didn't even know what the specification might be. Like we talked about earlier, like you know, you don't know what is a good article until you see it, and then you're like, oh, that's something that I feel allergic to, you know?
Totally. And I think that's the really interesting thing, is so much of the world is not specified. And it's really interesting to see these companies like OpenAI going down the like RL route with getting better at tasks where you can specify the end result in every step, verify the end result in every step, which will do some interesting things, but like so much of the world is outside of the realm of what can be specified. And I think people just like sort of miss that or assume that like eventually it will all be specified. And I think that it won't. Specifications tend to be too low dimensional to express like all the stuff that's going on. There's some things always have to be sort of inexplicit is my sort of philosophical view. And I think the beauty of language models is it is the first time that we have had tools that can deal with things that are inexplicit. We've never had that before. It's always any kind of computer you have to be able to specify. It has to be exact, has to be like mathematical and logical, basically. And LLMs are like, here's an example. Just like classify it based on these examples, or like follow the examples or whatever, which is a good way to talk about something or point to something that is inexplicit. Like, why is that example like a good example? You can probably boil it down to rules, but there's something there that is still kind of unexpressed, or there's a lot more richness in an example than the rule that you use to describe the example. I love that. I love all that stuff. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, like I mean, I do wonder like how far it will go, like how if we're going to keep seeing this exponential improvement, or if it's going to be an S curve. Like even if it does tail off, I think we'll have enough to keep us busy for 50 years. Even with the models just stopped improving today, so I'm not worried about that. But yeah, like I always think about this thing. People talk about billiards or snooker or pool. You can calculate where a ball is going to hit for like the first bounce, but like by the third or fourth bounce, you'd need like more time than has ever passed in the entire universe to calculate where it's going to hit. And I think there's something in that,
I first read that in one of the Nassim Taleb books. I can't remember if it's Fooled by Randomness or The Black Swan or whatever. And I love that because the reason why is because you have to start to take into account the pull of gravity of every like object in the universe in order to like because everything pulls on everything else. And so like after one hit, it's not that much pull, but after the fifth, it's like a lot, Yeah. Same thing for personality prediction. It's like, if you can get 80% of what I would do, you might be able to predict the next thing I do. But like once we get 5 moves out, things are wildly diverging.
Yeah, but then essentially, like you're not going to fit the gravitational pull of every object in the universe in the prompt.
Yeah, exactly. Probably not.
Yeah, you can't. It doesn't matter how good the models get. Like it doesn't matter how good we get at pre-training or whatever. Like it's never going to be able to completely specify. Like it's always going to be a simplification of reality, right? It's always a model.
And then I think to your question about like where things go, and like obviously like I don't really know either, but my feeling about this stuff is we tend to collapse our view of ourselves and the world to reflect the tools that we have at our disposal. So as an example, when we only had like watches and telescopes and calculus, like we tended to think of the human mind and the universe as sort of like a mechanical clock,
Yeah.
And of operating according to Newtonian mechanics, which it sort of does if you look at it that way. But also, if you look at it a different way, it does not work like that at all. But we were completely convinced that like for hundreds of years, basically, that's how everything worked. And we just needed to do a better job of specifying or finding the like underlying rules or principles by which the clock of our minds or the clock of the universe worked. And then Einstein came along and he was like, well, it's not really like that at all, from this other perspective, or maybe this larger perspective or whatever. And I think something similar happens with language models, where like you look at a thing that can do a lot of tasks that you're used to being able to do, and you're immediately like, it's going to do everything I do, because like you just sort of shrink your sense of self and sense of the world and sense of what you can do to like that thing. At least initially, it tends to like hide all of the complexity of who you are and what you can do and like all that kind of stuff. But But I think over time, what we will discover that there's like a lot of things about us that it's not able to do, even if it's operating at PhD or post PhD levels. We just can't like see what that is right now, but like I think that it's there. And that I that's another example of like ways that new technologies cause us to like see things differently and mistakes we tend to make. Yeah, I really think I said this before on this show, but like I think there's this false peak thing with AI where every time you get to a new level, you're like, I can see the peak right there. And once I get there, that's going to be it. It's going to take over everything. And then you get to that peak and there's another horizon that opens up. And I think that that's true too. Like humans are way more flexible and powerful than I think we give ourselves credit for in a lot of ways. And not to say that this technology is not amazing and powerful. And I totally think that too. But there's, it's, I think holding both is important.
Yeah. Do you know the bull jobs book, like the hypothesis that something like 40% of all the jobs in the economy are basically like unnecessary?
No.
Like admin jobs. So he uses the example of like, a parcel being delivered to a military base, right? Mm-hmm. And 50 years ago, the guy who was delivering the parcel, like a package from Amazon, whatever it is, would just like take it straight up to the soldier, and then the soldier would sign for it, right? Mm-hmm. And like today, the guy has to like go and like put it in a holding space, and then there's a admin, like a manager, office manager of the holding space, who signs for it, fills in a form, and then they take it. There's someone else who goes, and then they sign it off, and then they have like HR kind of training, and basically when you kind of add all these extra people in, the cost is inflated by 50%, but like the same task is still being done. There has been no improvement in the efficiency of parcel delivery. Right? And I don't know if I fully agree with his thing, but like the interesting germ of a thought in my head when I read that book was, we already have like universal basic income. It's just that it's just that like, they're like admin jobs. Maybe that's controversial, but like I do think you see what like say Elon is doing in some of his companies or in the government now, and like ripping out a lot of these jobs that like actually don't seem to make a measurable difference. I mean, we'll see, right? Like what happens if he still keeps getting away with it. But like, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting hypothesis. So like, if you believe that, then essentially all of the gains from the internet and all the productivity gains essentially went to creating this extra 40% float. And then AI might just make that 80% or 90%.
That's interesting. I don't think I agree with that fully. I think the interesting devil's advocate, not that I think you're definitely not arguing with you agree with everything about that book, but I think the interesting devil's advocate is like, why? Like one way to think about it is like, we make all those sorts of rules because like, we just want to waste things basically, but usually there is at least some organizational reason why. It's like there's some like risk management thing where it's like, well, if the parcel gets delivered directly to the soldier, then like XYZ bad thing happens, and so we need to like create more process or whatever. And usually like I think the interesting thing about human organization is that we've needed process or rules in order to facilitate collaboration between large groups of people. That like system of rules just creates a lot of bureaucracy and middle management and like things that like everyone sort of complains about and doesn't really like. Even the people who are doing it, they don't really like it. But like we need that in order to coordinate masses of people. Mm-hmm. And I think like one possibility for AI is that it removes the need for so many like layers and rules and processes, because like the AI can do a lot of the like coordination stuff that usually would require lots of middle managers or and that kind of stuff. I think another way that I like sort of agree with this, one of the conclusions of this sort of like hypothesis is like when I go to, get my shirt tailored in Brooklyn, like they don't take credit card, it takes a long time for people to adapt new technologies. Even we are not getting in as much out of this stuff as we possibly could. Like there's so much stuff that I'm sure is like latent in the tool. And so like pure productivity, pure efficiency, like it takes a really long time to filter through society. And it's not like, one of the things that I always say when I talk to people at big companies is like, I think AI is like a really good test of what would happen if we had magic powers. Like we would just basically do nothing. Like maybe we would create like a working group where people would like, some people at the company would like spend some of their time like figuring out what to do with our new magic spell casting abilities. But like we probably then wouldn't even, it would take them a year and they wouldn't actually figure anything out. And so I think we tend to feel or believe that just because we have a new capability that it just sort of like gets integrated like super fast in society, and that's definitely not true.
Yeah, I think where there is some kind of insight here is that a lot of the way that we organize people is based on kind of like organizational scar tissue, I guess is how I think about it. Like, one person, one time did something really stupid, and therefore now we have a form, right?
My dad is always like, one guy tried to blow himself up with his shoes in like 2006.
Yeah.
And like now we have to take our shoes off like every time. And it's like, yeah, that is true. Like the shoe bomber, he ruined it for everybody. And it didn't even succeed.
And we're like afraid to tear down the fence in case something comes through it, like, yeah. So like, I think it does serve a purpose, but I think it's like an emotional purpose, and like a sociological purpose, maybe like, it makes us feel good that we have these protections in place, even if they're not actually doing something measurable. Right.
Yeah.
So I actually think that AI will increase them, right? Because the only reason we have, like, to take your example, the only reason we have the TSA scanning your bags at an airport but not at a train station is that like it's too inconvenient to do it at a train station. Like you couldn't do this in the subway in New York, right? The whole thing would shut down. Maybe they should. I don't know. We've had some issues recently, but like as it becomes more convenient to make you fill in forms and to do administrative tasks, I feel like eventually that's just going to balloon, and you'll have like my AI talking to the government AI, and like checking that everything's okay, across like 1,000 different forms.
As long as I don't have to do it, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's true. It's still a win, I guess, if it's automated.
I think one of the things you're saying that I agree with is like, actually the limits of the technology right now are not even the limits of what's technologically possible. Like there's, you can't, like GPT 3.5 could have taught you how to make a nuclear bomb, but it doesn't, because like OpenAI made it so it wouldn't do that, And so there's all sorts of ways in which the technology is limited by our tolerance for risk, and everyone's tolerance for risk is different. So every organization has a different approach to like what risks they're willing to take or whatever. And to some degree, that's what makes baseball. Like, I think that's actually good.
Yeah, they can find the right answer like collectively by saying, "Oh, that feels wrong." Like when they've released it completely openly, like they get backlash, or or like if they're too conservative, then they fall behind, and it becomes like a real race.
Exactly, and it also provides opportunities for startups, because like what OpenAI can do is just different from what like you and I can do. Every government in the world is like watching them like a hawk, and and we're just, no one's really watching us because it's small enough that like no one cares, and so we can take more risks and find out more good things to do with it than a bigger company can. So another way in which I think people were wrong at the outset of AI stuff is to be like, oh, incumbents are just going to win, and it's like incumbents always it up, and it's about risk taking, and it's not their fault. It's not like they're stupid. It's just massively difficult to take real risks when you have like tons and tons of customers in a big organization and like all this pressure. Like it's just not a good environment for that.
Yeah, it's really rare that they manage to do something good, and it's not through lack of trying, right? They've all read the disruption stuff, right? Literature, and like they all see it happening, and you can see them trying their best to do it. But I would say actually they're doing. I think the scorecard is pretty good. Like I know people talk about Google and falling behind and all this stuff, but I would say big companies are innovating faster today than they ever have.
Yeah.
And like there was one example that really jumped out in my mind where I went to I went to like a conference. I think it was like it was 2 months after ChatGPT came out, right? It was like a B2B like enterprise, like it was all like Fortune 500 companies, and like they had like NASA there and talking about AI and stuff like this, and they said who's working on like generative AI projects, and like 80% of the hands shot up. And I was like, this is like 2 months after ChatGPT. It's pretty amazing. And just contrast that with like, I was working in growth marketing, like growth hacking with my agency. That was a growth hacking agency. We started in 2014. And it was, it took like 4 years before our first Fortune 500 client like Googled the term growth hacking. Like we were number one for growth hacking on Google. And yeah, it was like 4 years before we got our first enterprise client.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like mobile, it took years, or even the internet, years and years and years and years. Yeah. That's interesting. I do think that they're getting better at it because they've been learning their lesson in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I want to talk about Cursor, but before we do that, I want to bring this whole conversation back around to Rally because we haven't shown people Rally. And so if you feel like showing a demo, like I think it'd be really fun. I just think it's the coolest piece of software.
Yeah. So, we talked about the script earlier about how I was A/B testing your headlines, the multimodal media versus metamedia, and what I've done in the past like couple of weeks is put like a basic user interface on it, and I have that live now actually with a wait list, but it's at askrally.com, and this is like the main thing I'm working on now, just to see how far we can push it, because I'm getting like surprisingly good responses when I run this, and I've got like maybe 20 of my friends checking it out now. So yeah, we could try having a look on the call as well.
That's great. Yeah, let's do it. So basically, for people who are listening instead of watching, so like the Rally screen is at the top. You see something that says like your audiences, and you can pick an audience. So like millennials, manufacturing CEOs. There's an audience in there. General population. There's an audience in there that's like Hacker News audience. Dog lovers in Dallas. Every audience.
That's my test audience I always use because it's the first thing I think of.
Perfect.
For some reason.
Yeah. Let's do Hacker News. So like if we select Hacker News. And then it's like, what would you like to ask the audience? There's a text box. So it's sort of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but like, for real, anyone can do it. You don't have to know Regis Philbin. So do you have a question or should we use, I can come up with one. Should we use the metamedia one?
Yeah, well, why don't we do like maybe do like a headline test? Do you have like a couple of headlines for the latest posts? Like you just
totally. We just did a new launch where we said like Every now includes Quora, which is our email app, and basically as part of the Every bundle, like you pay one price, you get access to Quora and all the other stuff we make. So the current headline is the Every bundle now includes Quora, which I don't really like that much. Here, the Every bundle now includes Quora.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've been thinking about is like whether or not we should call it a bundle or just like the Every subscription or Every. People don't say like the Prime bundle; they just say Prime.
Yeah, membership so maybe.
What?
Membership, like Every membership.
Maybe, yeah. Membership is an interesting one. So like maybe a B would be like Every now includes Quora. Manage your emails with AI.
I don't know whether you like the capitalizations on each one.
Yeah, we usually do all caps basically, but like I don't think the caps like make that much. That'd be a good A/B test. Is do the caps make a difference on what people click on?
Yeah,
we can do that.
Yeah, later, I used to test stuff like that in the agency. Yeah.
And then the last one would be like Every now includes Quora, the most human way to manage your inbox.
Okay, so Every now includes Quora, the most human way to manage inbox. Yeah, my wife always complains about the loud sound of my typing because I'm like a heavy typer. You're probably hearing that now.
There's that George Clooney movie, Up in the Air, where she says like, "I type with purpose." I always think about that.
There you go. I need to use that line. Cool. So we have the 3 different examples, and this is just like sending a prompt to ChatGPT. So we were going to kind of tell tell it like what we want out of this. And in this case, you're going to say, which of these headlines would you click on?
Probably like, I want to know if they would open it, like, because it's going to go to their inbox.
Yeah. Okay. These are email subject lines for the publication. Which of these headlines would you open? Okay, so we'll just keep it simple there. And then I'm going to put it in voting mode, which just basically just gives it like a tally at the top as well. So
cool. So I don't think I've seen voting mode. That must be
I just added it. Yeah. Thank you, Claude.
That's the other thing I love about this like era of AI tools is like everyone's just shipping so fast. You're just like, oh yeah, I added that like in an hour, like two days ago. I had the idea and I just did it. It's like I love that.
Yeah. No, it's definitely really appealing. The problem is like when you have to refactor everything.
Yeah, and then the UI gets messy, and the whole thing is like, yeah. So basically, you typed in a prompt, and then basically it spun up an audience, and then it asked the audience that question. So like, which of these three would you click on? And then what you can see, basically, return the results. And the results are every now includes Quora, the most human way to manage your inbox, is by far the most clicked on or opened one, which is really interesting. And the most human way to manage your inbox is the one that we've been going with. So that's cool. But also in the sidebar, you can see like each individual like simulated person, like what they said. So like, the phrase "the most human way to manage your inbox" stands out to me because it suggests a more personal approach, which resonates with my values about technology and its impact on our lives. So like that's what one of these AI people said about why they clicked on it. And then you also have this like summary thing where it's like it summarizes what everyone says. So the feedback indicates a strong preference for the subject. Every now includes the Quora, the most human way to manage your inbox. The choice resonates due to its emphasis on balancing technology with a human touch, which aligns with the values of the individuals. So like, I think that's really interesting. And I think we would get different results. For example, like if we change the audience, or another thing that I know you're building, which I really want, is like, I don't want it to be testing them against each other. I want them tested in the context of someone's inbox and the kind of emails they usually have to see like which one of them is clicked more or opened more. And I'm sure I know that that's coming, but like, yeah, this is so valuable. It's like, before you'd had to like throw it out into the world, and that costs time and money. And if you don't have an audience, like it's really hard. Or if you don't know the people it's going to be going to, like whatever. So yeah, I love this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you have like a sense of whether you're asking the right questions, or if you really disagree with the result or you really agree with it, you can then go and validate with the real test, right? So it just kind of gives you more options and more room to navigate these different creative decisions.
Right. Obviously, like disclaimer, this could be wrong. It's another piece of information,
Exactly. Yeah. It's another opinion. And, this is like still pretty early as well. So like we're working on getting all the evals set up and, doing the rigorous testing against like real human responses. So, that's coming too. But yeah, that's like a long road. And, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do. Like the thing I'm working on right now, I showed you earlier today, is like a Hacker News simulator as well. So you've got like all the Hacker News links from today, and then you just like insert your headline in there and just see if they click on that one.
I love it.
We'll see how that goes. Yeah,
that's the best. So you're using Cursor for all this stuff. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've tried a bunch of them, right? Like I tried Windsurf and heavy like copy and paster initially. Early adopter of GitHub Copilot, and the reason I like Cursor and I keep coming back to it is just that you can hop quite quickly between very low level and very high level. So my typical flow is I'll actually like talk through an idea. Like I'll record myself just kind of like blabbing about the thing I want to build, because I don't really know what I want to build yet.
Like in a voice note, or
like quite often it would be just record it. Like I'll use like Descript just because it's like what I have on my computer for recording video. So I'll just record. It doesn't really matter what you record it with, but then I'll transcribe that. So you can upload that to Google Gemini, like the AI Studio, and it's pretty good at transcription. So I tend to do that, and then I'll have like a transcript of me blabbing, and I'll stick that into usually Claude and kind of get a PRD, like a product requirements document, kind of. I'll edit that quite a lot, and that's where I think a lot of the prompting.
Claude versus O1.
Yeah, I tend to use Claude still over O1. I think O1 Max is. Sorry, they change all the names, but like the $200 version, I do use that. I'm using that more and more, but I still find Claude is like more creative.
Yeah,
is that in the way I can describe it? I use O1 to settle problems. Like it's like the big daddy that comes in and just like fixes the problem. Like when Claude is like getting in a loop and doesn't know what to do. So like I'll take that PRD and I'll run like the cursor agent and let it just completely go nuts and create as many files at once, like, do whatever it likes. And then I'll kind of look back and see what I have, and if it works, and I'll change a few things based on the general vibe. But when it gets stuck, which is actually pretty often, then that's when I kind of jump out to O1 in some cases and say like, hey, here's the context, here's where it's getting stuck, like here's what we've tried, and I'll just kind of copy all that and then get the answer back.
But you say you're editing the PRD that comes out of Claude before you put it into Cursor. Like you're not just YOLOing it. Tell me about that, because I like. One of my failure modes when I do this stuff is sometimes I just YOLO it because I'm just like too lazy, and it kind of gets and yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I found that quite a lot. Like, it's actually similar to what we talked about earlier with the evals, where what I'm looking for is like, what do I strongly agree with, and what am I allergic to? So I'm scanning mostly. I'm not like fully reading in a lot of detail, but I'm just like looking for things. It's actually similar to like if an employee sent me something, and I'd be like, I'm going to scan it and just see if there's anything that really upsets me here. And if not, then it's like fine to go ahead. But quite often, especially when it's a new feature that I haven't really thought through, then I'm like, I see that it's tried to do this, and that feels really wrong to me. So I'm going to change my whole approach. Actually, that was like why DeepSeek was really good. Actually, is I used that a fair bit over the past week. But just the ability to kind of see the thinking and just see like, it's thinking wrong. Like I must have got something wrong in my prompt. Like it's trying to create a new file, but I already have that file. I just needed to put it into the context. So it's really about refining. Like it's just me figuring out what I actually want, and then once I'm fairly like happy with that, then like it's much easier to build the stuff.
Interesting. What do you think of O3? Are you using it at all?
I did try O3 Mini a bunch today, and I would say it's like an impressive model. It's surprisingly fast, which was like my first impression for a thinking model.
Which makes a big difference. Like it's not trivial that it's fast.
Yeah, I find I lose. I don't know if you find this, but like I lose a lot of productivity because I'll like just dump my thoughts into O1 and then just say like, go have a coffee. But like, there's only so many coffees you can have in one day. So then I'm like browsing Twitter and I'm like talking about politics. And I'm like, oh God, this is like, I look up like 30 minutes later, like, oh yeah.
I have the same thing. Like I did that this morning with deep research. Like I posted this like really big, deep research question. It was like a page of stuff. And then I like went out and like got coffee and just I knew it was working. It was so weird. It was
I need to find something to do in that thinking time. Like I did this.
Maybe just enjoy yourself. How about that?
I did hear someone say that the other day. They were like, it's really nice to like have regular breaks now with AI. It was before I was thinking the whole day. But no, I mean it reminds me a lot of like my first like internship. It was in the UK government, in like the benefits, like government benefits, like Social Security is like the equivalent. And we were writing analysis code basically in SAS, which is like a very old language. And we'd write the code and then we'd send it off to a central server, and it would take a couple hours to run. So I basically did no work that whole internship. It was like, sorry, my code's running, and it's like, I think there's like an XKCD comic that makes fun of this as well. Like my code's compiling. But yeah, it feels like we're back in those times again,
Back to the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to find a way to be productive. I was thinking about maybe I should start double teaming Cursor. So like I'll have like, I'll have like my blog writing in Cursor like on one tab, and I'll be creating blogs and like talking about those, and then like while O1's working in the background on the other thing.
I like that. I was doing that a lot with Devin when I was using it. Like I would have 4 Devins at once doing different things, and then I would be like, every if you have 4 of them, every minute like something it needs help on, and so you're just like constantly kind of like tending it. And it reminded me a lot of when I was in college, I used to play online poker, and like I was never that good, but like good players can like play 4 tables at once or whatever. And so like sometimes I would do that because like whatever, I was in college and I was an idiot, but like it felt like that, where it's like you're doing all these different things all at once, but you don't each one only requires divided attention, so you can get it all done. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's like those people, the chess grandmasters you see in Washington Square Park, and they're playing like 4 games at once.
Yeah.
It does feel like that, but yeah, I wonder how much we're really getting done when we do that.
I don't know. Well, I mean, to some degree, like running a company is like that. It's very similar, where I'm constantly just like I'll spend like 3 minutes like looking at something and go on to the next thing or whatever. So I just think more people are going to be working that way. With all of its benefits and all of its trade-offs. And we're going to have to like figure out how to manage that,
Yeah. Like what I really want to try and get good at is doing it while I'm like on a call, like obviously not this call, but like I find quite often, maybe this is just me, but like I'll be on a call and like it could have taken 5 minutes, like the actual relevant part of it was 5 minutes. And I don't even need to take notes anymore because AI is listening and taking notes for me. So, so like that's the thing. I like haven't quite got good at it yet. But yeah, that's the dream, is like I can be like managing Cursor in the background while I'm like also,
Also, it's just like I'll have my agent call your agent, and like we don't even need to get on the phone,
Yeah, do you know one of the things, one of the really out there ideas that I would love is maybe I'll just do it for fun on the weekend, but like I'd love like a negotiation, like settlement kind of agent where I give it like my red lines, and it's like a trusted third party, and you give it your red lines and say like, this is the price I'm willing to pay, this is what I want to argue for, and then it just goes back and forth for our like virtual negotiation, and then it comes back and says like, we've settled at this price, it's the best you could get.
I think it's cool. And then it's like you have to also decide how much you want to fund the agent, like how many compute cycles does the agent get to a result,
Yeah, this was a big thing with the early agents, like Agent GPT. I don't know if you ever played with that back in the day. I say back in the day, it's like 2 years ago. It's still going, but yeah, like I remember seeing a talk by those guys, and it was like it really stuck out to me because they had LLM judges in their CI pipeline. So like whenever they pushed code to that repo, they had AI agents like checking the code and making sure it didn't break and running tests. And that at the time that was kind of radical. Now there's like products that do that. But they said they were spending like $200 every time they pushed a commit.
That's crazy.
That's crazy, but also like very, like now that same commit probably costs like $2, right?
Totally. Probably less. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it makes sense. There is like a case to be made that you should just be spending as much money as possible in AI, because we're almost like definitely being too conservative.
Totally. Agreed. Well, that is a great place to leave it. This is a great conversation. I'm so glad we finally did this. I'm so excited for Rally. I'm so excited to get to work with you. If people are looking to find you and your work online, where can they find you?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm hammer_MT. So it's probably the easiest place to find me. And then the book that I did for O'Reilly was Prompt Engineering for Generative AI. It's on Amazon. It's got like an armadillo on the front, so it's easy to spot.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Cool. Thanks, man.
smash that like button and subscribe to AI and I. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show, it's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.